When it comes to street photography, there's really no right or wrong lens choices, but this video is aimed to show you some examples of some very different lenses and the different types of photos you can create shooting street photography at different focal lengths. Hello from pretty cold and rainy Venice. This video is all about picking lenses for street photography. So I've got my 3 favorite lenses and I'm going to be shooting around Venice with them for hopefully a pretty even period of time to see which one I get the best results with. I'm going to be using a 24 and a 50mm prime. These are my probably most used lens. And then also a 70-200 zoom lens. So the point of this video is, yes, to help you pick what style of street photography or which lenses you like. And it's not going to be the perfect experiment. Of course, as a photographer, I have my own biases when it comes to lenses. Some I might take more shots on, might have better conditions, whatever the fact. But it should give you a pretty good example of the type of images you can get. And this might be a really good experiment for you to try for yourself. So that's what I'll be doing. Let's jump in. So kicking this one off with the 24mm prime, this is an f1.8 lens, but as you'll see here, I'm really using it wide open for these type of street photos, usually shooting around f4 or 5. So I have picked out some of my favorites here from Venice on this lens. Naturally, wider lenses are really suited to show more of the overall scene. Think of them much like an establishing shot. You can really get a sense of the location and what's happening in that scene, whether it is a 24, 28, or even up to a 35mm prime. I really like these wider angles for street photography and the type of photos you can create. So I often gravitate to the 24 for showing a smaller subject within a larger scene, much like this, where you can really highlight things like interesting architecture and buildings, unique patches of light, especially scenes like this with some symmetry. This one is perhaps one of my favorites on the 24, although not perfect, the balance just feels slightly off. I do wish the subject was perhaps heading to the area of more space in the shot, but naturally I was trying to highlight the building and just this space that I found here, which was quite interesting. This shot here I really like as well, which I caught as someone was walking out of one of these dark alleyways into the light. So I really underexposed this in camera to keep these shadows dark. Make sure to check out a video I posted recently on how to use aperture priority if you want a bit more information on how I tend to expose different types of photos and all the settings I use for different situations when shooting street photography. A similar shot here towards a patch of light from a dark area, the dark silhouette and pop of the red umbrella, again in a very mysterious shot. I just like the overall weight of this composition as well. I also have 1 or 2 more in this style of image, often using a lot of negative space. Naturally, with a wider lens, the more you're going to fit in your frame. So this is a technique I really like using with these lenses, but the busier a city gets, obviously this gets harder, which is why I love early mornings so much. Of course, you can also still highlight interesting subjects closer if you like shooting up close and personal to people, which can really test you out at 24mm. But as you can probably tell from these examples, this isn't typically a style I shoot a lot of. So I really have shot a lot on this lens recently. It's also small and lightweight, which makes it really nice for street photography. But I do also believe that shooting wider is a really good way to challenge your composition skills. Fitting more in your frame means you do have to be more mindful of how everything works together. Lastly, a few more artistic shots, still possible on a 24mm, but for me at least, I find this style of shot often more suited to slightly longer lenses. So moving on to the 50mm prime, which is usually still quite a lightweight and easy to use prime for street photography, but I am using the RF 1.2 here, so a pretty unconventional 50mm as it is super heavy. I find 50mm as more of a transitional focal length, but I also find it one of the most versatile focal lengths for street photography, largely because you can still get these establishing type shots if you have enough space to work with, really introducing a scene and your location. But you can also start to dial in a little bit more on characters and subjects, or even further to dial in and show finer details a bit more. Now we can start to place a little bit more weight on the subject as we can show them in a bit more detail. This is why I really like 50mm for a nice balance between the subject and the overall scene. even up to the point where the subject almost takes up most of the space in the frame. At 50, you can also get up close to things. So this is great for more detailed shots. Lastly, again, for these slightly more abstract styles, having a bit more reach is also really useful for these type of shots. This is actually one of my favorite shots from this time in Venice, having this feeling almost of a painting. That's why personally I think 50mm is great. Lots of different options for compositions, and why I think it really is one of the most versatile. Alright, lastly onto the 70-200 or any Tele Lens really. This could be something like an 85 if sticking to primes. I do think this is also a really great lens for street photography. I posted a video recently on Tele Lenses as well, so although they are great, I do think they are quite easy to fall into some bad habits as well. I know I do it, and I see it a lot with others as well. It's easy for your shots to become a bit more one-dimensional in my opinion when you're just zooming in right on a subject at a longer focal length, much like a few of these examples. Again, this is fine, but I really like to mix up the type of images I'm creating. As touched on earlier, I also like longer lenses for more abstract styles of street photography, where colors and textures can really shine when they're given a larger weight in the overall frame. If you're looking for a bit of inspiration for this type of photography, especially at longer focal lengths, I can really recommend checking out the work of the great Sol Leiter. Really artistic but beautiful street photography where color and texture become so important. Sadly, looking at my examples here, I am missing some shots that I usually like to capture with a Tele Lens, which is really capturing those finer details. As there was lots of rain, sometimes holding an umbrella as well, having the 70-200, and if I wanted to zoom on that as well, was definitely far less practical, so it probably got used least here, and I neglected some of these frames I usually search for with a Tele. But to me, this is why reviewing and then also curating your images as a whole is so important. Contemplating what shots you actually like, why you like them, what type of shots did you maybe not get enough of and should do next time, etc, etc. All of this information is really important and really useful for next time you go out taking photos. So here's an overall summary of just the images that I actually really liked that I took that day, ones that I starred as possible favorites to show in this video. So overall, I had around 25 on the 24mm, 35 images on the 50mm, and around 20 on the 70-200, which does make a lot of sense. As mentioned, I find 50 the most versatile for how I like to shoot. Naturally, you might get totally different results, so I really recommend trying this out for yourself, coming back and analyzing the results just like this. Here's also a bit of a summary just in terms of how I reach for these different lenses. This is just my opinion and also a bit of an oversimplification, but hopefully it's useful. This is how I often approach which type of shots I want to capture and which lens I should perhaps swap to help facilitate this. So thanks so much for watching. I hope you found this one interesting. Please do subscribe. If you did, keep on creating and keep on growing, my friends. I will catch you in the next one. Bye for now.